Welcome back to the channel. This will be my transfer plans for Game Week 30. We still have over a week left until the next deadline, but it's still worth talking about my initial plans because things can change over the international break. Certain key players have walked off with injuries and sustained issues already, so I'll be discussing them as we go along and also talking about other definitive updates regarding players who were previously orange flagged, for example, and that now have a great chance of starting in Game Week 30, some of which I have discussed already, but it's worth mentioning some of them in more detail for those that aren't aware. On screen you can see my FPL challenge team, and I got 49 points in Blank Gameweek 29. Thankfully, for my usual FPL squad, I got even more points, as I'll talk about very soon, and this is my provisional squad with the new challenge, which is called Fortified Front. You can pick 4 midfielders and 3 forwards, and you can't change the formation. Let me know your FPL challenge teams down in the comment section below, and I'll lock it in, as well as my FPL team, the actual one that really matters, you could say, in the deadline stream in over a week's time. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 33,000 subscribers. Check all the links in the description below, which includes my FPL Challenge League, also the OG League, which is essentially the FPL League as well, which you can always see in every single video in the description for the Fantasy Premier League content. And there's also my Patreon, Championships, Discord server, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. There's a lot of different social media platforms in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. It has been a while since Blank Gameweek 29, but it's worth discussing my performance, talking about the good and bad aspects of it, and it was a roller coaster of a week. On this Saturday, things were looking quite bleak, and Matt Sells didn't help things at all, with only 1 point against Ipswich Town, and we saw a similar pattern when I first brought him in against Southampton, where Forest have a 3 or 4 goal lead, and then they concede some late goals towards the end. So maybe against the tougher teams on paper, that's where Forest have their full concentration for the 90 minutes, and they have a good chance of keeping clean sheets in those matches where things are cagier, and against those weaker opposition, they are more offensive and they leave more gaps in behind, and sometimes when they've already got that 3 or 4 goal cushion, they kind of rest a little bit, they concede a goal or two, and there's no clean sheet. It was Milinkovic who was the star of the show in that defensive line, with a goal and an assist, producing a double-digit haul, but the likes of Aina, Mika Williams and Sells were all quite disappointing this week. Only 1 point there against Ipswich Town, and Sells would have been the most popular goalkeeper for Blank Gameweek 29, but in my case I'm still quite happy with him because he kept clean sheets against Arsenal and Man City, and in the long term I still would argue he's the best goalkeeper in the game, but it's not clear cut. You still got Pickford despite Everton having terrible fixtures right now, and I would recommend Sells over him. David Raya is another option who is right up there in the podium of goalkeepers, Dean Henderson for double Game Week 32, and a few others here and there, but I think Sells is still number 1, but it might not be clear cut, and there are different ways of covering this position, and you can still go for a Forest defender like Milinkovic until the end of the campaign. As for my own defenders, it was quite mixed bag, but one of my new signings, Gabriel, got a 5-pointer. He was booked against Chelsea, and if it wasn't for that, he would have gotten bonus points due to the BPS system. So it is a bit of a shame, to be honest, but Gabriel is still a great signing. I replaced Trent Alexander-Arnold with him, and he is essentially a season-long keep, although I've still got the wild card in my back pocket and I can always bring him in. By that stage, I thought it made a lot of sense to buy Gabriel, and Arsenal were able to beat Chelsea 1-0, keep the clean sheet, and do very solid there. Levi Colwill also got booked in the same game, delivering 1 point, whilst Miklenko blanked in a 1-1 draw, so nothing really to talk about there. But with Robinson, he was on course for 8 points, and that got dropped down to 7, which was quite frustrating, and he's now yellow flagged. But according to the USA manager Mauricio Pochettino, it is an injury, but he hasn't actually discussed the extent of the injury. It might just be a small knock, and it doesn't seem to be too serious. I think he'll be available for Game Week 30, but Fulham, a bit like Everton actually, have terrible fixtures, and both players are sellable over the coming weeks, and even though Robinson has the assist for it, and he might be worth keeping for those with a lot of value tied up in him, like myself, I still think going from Robinson to Munoz, for example, is a great upgrade, with double Game Week 32 in mind, and also the fixture right in front of us when Crystal Palace face Southampton away. Looking at my midfield though, it was pretty decent, you could say, and there was only one man who really carried it. Bruno Fernandes, as my captain, was the game changer, with a goal, 2 assists in the last game of Blank Gameweek 29, and of course delivering maximum bonus. He's got a good record against Leicester. He did very well in the reverse fixture in the Premier League, and he is in great form at the moment. He scored a hat-trick against Real Sociedad in the Europa League, and in this competition, the Premier League, he did return in 4 consecutive games now with 3 double-digit hauls. He is carrying Manchester United at this moment in time. Mbeumo also got an assist and a bonus point, so that was fairly decent. He is quite template, so really the rank gains came from Bruno Fernandes as my captain. Justin Kluivert blanked, but he can be forgiven. He's been very consistent for that price. And Cole Palmer missed the Emirates test yet again for the second season running, which was quite surprising to be fair, but it looks like his injury is more serious than we thought, and he has been carrying some issues in terms of illnesses and injuries over the last couple of weeks. But if he is available against Tottenham, I think he is a great hold for Gameweek 30 and one of the best captains, as I'll show you in future videos and podcasts, which includes the deadline stream next Tuesday. Now, the forward line was quite woeful, to be honest. Both Chris Wood and Evanilson blanked, and in the last few seconds of the deadline stream, I bought Bruno Fernandes in, and I had the captaincy on Chris Wood, but I switched it to Bruno. He was second in my overall list, and Chris Wood was third, and I'm very grateful that I made that decision. That was the game changer for me, and what ended up resulting in a good week as opposed to a pretty awful one. And I was also very close to buying Erling Haaland and Elanga, and it would have been Matheus Cunha making way. Of course, in this case, I'll sold him for Evanilson, but I would have bought Elanga in for Cole Palmer. So in the end, by captaining Bruno and getting Evanilson, I gained a few more points from those decisions, but I was so close to buying Elanga and captaining Haaland instead, and that would have also proved to be very fruitful and enough for a green arrow. As for my bench though, nothing really needs to be said. For the second week running, I've got 0 points there. That's not going to happen again because, of course, these players will feature in Gameweek 30 this time. But Veltman was another one who missed out, and I've had him for so long now. He's only returned for me once against Brentford in a goalless draw back in December, I believe. He has been an awful signing. It might have been January. I've almost forgotten how long it's been since he's returned for me, but he has been orange flagged and picked up mysterious injuries on multiple occasions, including the week I actually bought him. Isak and Salah were worth keeping in the long term. I'm happy they're still in my squad, and Valdi Morrison is not really worth commenting on, and he's only played once this season. As for my Gameweek points in the rank, I got 58 points with the -4 hit taken into account, and it was a green arrow which was quite substantial actually to 271k, so I'm quite happy with it. And once again, it comes down to Bruno Fernandes as my captain. That was the game changer in terms of my decisions this week because it was quite disappointing across the board and only a handful of players returned for me. Gabriel, Robinson, Bruno Fernandes and Mbeumo. The rest blanked, so I needed that captain to step up, and Bruno Fernandes was the best one this week amongst those kind of template options, you could say. I don't really think he was. I think that was a very low-owned, effective ownership differential captain. So it's one of the few times I've done it this season, and it feels quite rewarding actually, especially considering, you know, the kind of punches I took throughout the week on the Saturday in particular, and things got slightly better on the Sunday despite Palmer missing out, and I thought, yeah, red arrow is going to be completely secured, and I just have to, you know, hope I can claw back the deficit and make it respectable. Levi Colwill blank, but then Gabriel with a clean sheet, that's decent. Robinson clean sheet and bonus points, also pretty solid. And then Bruno Fernandes changed everything. But let's discuss the prices before talking about my transfer plans and my provisional team selection for Gameweek 30. And not much has changed recently because of the international break. People are kind of being quite astute and holding on to their transfers, which is my recommendation. Unless you're going to be priced out of certain things, I always recommend waiting for information because with the likes of Chris Wood, for example, he could be yellow flagged very soon. He sustained an injury against New Caledonia during the international break, so let's keep an eye out for that situation. The same goes for Robinson, but I think both of them will be available for Gameweek 30, but perhaps both of them might not start this weekend in the FA Cup. Ultimately, only concerned about the Premier League and if they're going to start in Gameweek 30, so that is definitely a situation that's very interesting. As for Cole Palmer, he's probably less likely to start against Tottenham as opposed to the other two due to the nature of the injury, but I think Cole Palmer will start against Tottenham as well, and he's got a great chance of turning his form around if that's the case. With price changes, I think Isak and Salah, they went down during the blank game week, but ever since, no one's going to be selling those players because they have great fixtures for the next couple of game weeks, and in the case of Isak, he has a double in Gameweek 32 as well, and with the rest, things have remained relatively stable. But let's now discuss my transfer plans, and I have to admit, I have made an early transfer already. Yes, it's not good. I always recommend waiting for information. That is the best thing to do during an international break with so many games happening, and also the FA Cup matches before the Gameweek 30 deadline. But I bought Daniel Munoz to replace Veltman. It was a no-brainer, facing Southampton away this week, and then a double in Gameweek 32. And I've wanted Munoz for quite a while now. He has been in excellent form. We just have to hope he goes unscathed in Colombia's final qualifying match before going back to Crystal Palace this weekend, and he might also start in that FA Cup tie as well. So in terms of how his minutes will be managed over the next week, that could be a potential concern for that fixture against Southampton, but it's a massive upgrade over Veltman, and it also gives me a bit of squad depth in my defensive line with Mykolenko facing Liverpool away and Robertson, who's yellow flagged, facing Arsenal at the Emirates. So I think I needed this defensive reinforcement regardless, and Munoz is my favourite from those doubling in Gameweek 32, even over Livramento and Dan Burn to cover Newcastle on the other side of that double. Now, other transfers could include the midfield and the forward line. Bryan Mbeumo to Eze would be a massive punt, and despite Brentford's fixtures, I'm still quite happy to keep Bryan Mbeumo for the long term. So this transfer is less likely, but I'm very bullish on Eze for Gameweek 30 against Southampton. He is going to be suggested in my future podcast with more detailed analysis very soon, but I think he can do really well in Gameweek 30 and 32, which is really the most important thing here with his Crystal Palace assets. But a cheaper option would be Ismaila Sarr, who was showing great form before the international break and the blank in Gameweek 29. But the final transfer is very likely to happen in the future, and that's Evanilson to Mateta. But it does require a downgrade elsewhere, because now I have 0.2 million left in the bank after buying Daniel Munoz for Joel Veltman. So with this transfer, this would likely be in Gameweek 31 or 32, and I need to downgrade somebody else in another position, and that's something I need to weigh up, and I'll discuss this in my transfer plan section later on using fpl.team, for example. But it's worth mentioning this. My plan now is to kind of stack up on Crystal Palace and Newcastle assets, and with all of that in mind, this is my provisional Gameweek 30 team selection with one transfer already being made. Matt Sells is in goal, facing Man United at home, who have been showing good form now, and that could be slightly more difficult than we'd have expected a couple of weeks ago, for example. But once again, it comes down to Forest facing big clubs or really good teams. They kind of step up on those occasions, and maybe this could be a cagey game, which would definitely benefit Forest from that perspective. But with the way Bruno Fernandes is playing right now for Man United, that could be slightly concerning for Sells' clean sheet probabilities. But I've also got Bruno Fernandes in my setup. As for my defensive line, Daniel Munoz, Colwill and Gabriel suddenly looks a bit better than what I had before, but the likes of Robinson and Mykolenko are currently on my bench, and one dilemma I had with my starting 11 was Colwill versus Robinson. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you look at different websites like fpl.team, Fantasy Football Hub, and all these different kind of algorithms, they would recommend Colwill over Robinson, especially after the yellow flag. But I also think the American has more attacking threat, and against Arsenal, especially if they're toothless and struggling to kind of break down that low block, which Fulham like to do against Arsenal, maybe that plays into Robinson's hands and he can produce a surprising return with a clean sheet and or an assist. But I think most likely with Robinson, you're going to get a 2-pointer, I'd like to say, but that is never going to be a guarantee. Fulham have a poor record against Arsenal, generally speaking, but they have fared quite well in recent meetings, and I think the Gunners could struggle once again against Fulham. But Munoz is the standout really in this defensive line for Gameweek 30, and in the long term, I think Gabriel is the best option overall. He is my favourite premium defender, even over Trent, who of course is injured now for the next couple of weeks, and I discussed him in my Transfits podcast a couple of days ago. And Gavardio has that attacking threat, a great fixture this week, but longer term, I don't trust Man City defensively as much as I would with Arsenal. Looking at my midfield though, I've got a full set here with 5 midfielders: Salah, Palmer, who's yellow flagged, Mbeumo, Kluivert and Bruno Fernandes. But once again, there is another benching dilemma here. Do I start Bruno Fernandes or Evanilson? I'm currently leaning towards Bruno for the form, and it's very difficult to bench a player who is scoring and assisting on such a regular basis. And I've already got Justin Kluivert to cover that Bournemouth attack, but it is Ipswich Town at home, and they've been leaking in goals and chances recently, so that could be a massive mistake. And if Cole Palmer were to miss out, a temptation would be to sell him to a cheaper midfielder and buy Erling Haaland up front, but that would be for a -8 in my case, or I just wildcard and make other changes elsewhere. Or perhaps I just start Evanilson and bench Cole Palmer for the time being. That is another possibility, and my squad depth is quite decent, so even if I get an injury or two, I could still go into Gameweek 30 with a full 11 without taking any hits and still be quite happy generally speaking, but not in my defensive line, because if the likes of Robinson or Mykolenko had to come in, I'd expect blanks, especially in the case of Mykolenko. I think Salah's a great captaincy option there against Everton. He has continued his good form in the international break with some goal contributions there for Egypt. I think Bryan Mbeumo isn't captainable against Newcastle away on paper, but he produced a massive return against them in the reverse fixture, and he's definitely worth keeping over the next couple. I think Kluivert would be more of a consideration for the armband, and he would be right up there in the rankings I'll provide in future podcasts. And Bruno Fernandes, as good as he's been playing, I don't think I'd captain him against one of the best defences in the Premier League. But now looking at my forward line, I've got Chris Wood and Isak, but of course in the case of the New Zealand striker, he could be yellow flagged very soon, and that could be something else to monitor. And I've already got quite a lot of yellow flag players at the moment with Cole Palmer and Anthony Robinson. I just saw Joel Vertman to Munoz as well. So I think with this, it seems like a traffic light system. Hopefully there are no red flag players. That is obviously going to be the main aim for Gameweek 30. But I think Isak is a great option there against Brentford at home. He scored in the Carabao Cup final only last week, and he is one of the best strikers in world football. That could be a high-scoring game between Newcastle and Brentford. We have seen that happen on a lot of occasions recently in those meetings. And I think with Chris Wood, he could just score one goal against Man United and get maximum bonus points. But will he start that game? That is something I'll provide updates on in future videos, like my team selection in a couple of days' time. Let's also discuss my bench, which is also very interesting. I've got the likes of Valdemarsson, Evanesson, Robinson and Mikalenko. So I've got decent squad depth there, especially in the forward line, and I'm quite happy to start Evanesson if needed. The others who could drop to the bench include Mbumo and Bruno Fernandes, or maybe Chris Wood if he ends up being ruled out for Gameweek 30. So there's a few benching dilemmas here. If I end up getting too many yellow flags and issues, I could always wildcard. I've got that in my back pocket. The same goes for the free hit, which I'm looking to use around Gameweek 33 or 34, and the other chip I've got is the bench boost, which can also be very fruitful in game weeks like 33 and 36. If you want me to discuss a chip strategy video, the best time to use every single chip and also discuss different strategies, then let me know down in the comment section below. Get this video to over 200 likes and all of that jazz. But finally, let's discuss the captaincy. I'm going for Salah at the moment, and Isak is my vice. There is an Erling Haaland-shaped hole in my squad. I don't even have Marmoush at the moment, but he could be my Chris Wood replacement, for example, for a -4 hit. But the other strike I'm looking at is Jean-Philippe Mateta. That is the strike I'm prioritising for the next 3 game weeks. Could he start in the FA Cup, then get benched against Southampton in Gameweek 30? That's a possibility, but I'd still want him in place for double Gameweek 32. So Mateta is my priority in that forward line, and ideally, I'd replace Evanesson with Mateta in Gameweek 31 or 32, but it isn't completely needed this week. And in the midfield, I'm quite happy with it generally speaking, but adding the likes of Anthony Gordon when he's back from suspension and Crystal Palace attackers like Eze or Sarr, that would also be on the agenda. A defender like Burn or Livramento is also something worth considering, but I don't feel the need to triple up on Newcastle and Crystal Palace. Having 4 to 5 players who double in Gameweek 32 would be enough, but the more the merrier. That's always kind of the thinking in double game weeks, and I've got different ideas with my chips, and I think once I fully commit to when I'm going to wildcard, I think the rest will fall under place, whether I bench boost in 36 or 33, for example, and perhaps I decide to do things a little bit differently with certain chips like the free hit as well, which I'm quite settled on in terms of using it in 33 or 34. It's just pinpointing that exact game week where it's penciled in. I think the announcements for the Gameweek 33 doubles, for example, would definitely play a part because certain fixtures from Gameweek 34 could still remain in that game week, but there's a lot in play still, and I think future announcements will be very critical in terms of determining my final chip strategy. But that is my 15-man squad at the moment. I'm quite happy with it. I think the absence of Man City assets would be a big pain this week, especially Erling Haaland, who I'd maybe captain over Salah this week. It would be a big debate, and I'll discuss the top 10 captaincy options, like I said, in future podcasts. I think that Salah Haaland #1 spot would be very interesting to debate. But let's also discuss expected points before talking about fpl.team and my preview of Gameweek 31. So Matt Sells has an expected points figure of 3.7. Both Munoz and Gabriel have 5 and over. So in the case of Munoz, he's got 5. That's fairly solid. Levi Colwill has 3.2, which isn't too shabby there. And Mohamed Salah is always top of these expected points rankings. These are according to Fantasy Football Hub. Isak is second, and he's my vice at the moment with 7.2. Cole Palmer would be much higher, but with the yellow flag, I think that has played a big part. He is currently at 5.5, and the rest are fairly solid, in and around 4.5 to 5.5, with Mbumo, Kluivert, Fernandes, and Chris Wood. And those on my bench are quite low, with the exception of Evanesson, who has 4.6. That is the one I'm quite skeptical about in terms of benching, and whoever I ended up going for in terms of leaving them out of my squad in Mbumo, Fernandes, Chris Wood, or Evanesson, all of them are capable of returning this week. Websites like fpl.team can be very useful in determining different transfer plans and chip strategies, so visualizing future game weeks can give you a clear idea of how things are going to look like in the future, and it might actually push you towards certain transfers, for example, or different captaincy options and just the way you want to approach FPL. So I'd highly recommend it. I've got Matt Sells in goal for Gameweek 31, facing Aston Villa away, and I could buy one of Livramento or Dan Burn in preparation for Gameweek 32, and I've got a plum fixture against Leicester away in Gameweek 31. Dan Burn is on 8 yellow cards, and 2 more yellows to get to 10 would mean that Dan Burn would be suspended for 2 Premier League matches before Newcastle played the 32nd league game. So that's a slight risk. If you want to avoid it, go for Livramento. I think both of them are great options from now until the end of the season. So a back three of Munoz, one of Livramento or Dan Burn, and Gabriel looks very solid for Gameweek 31. Mbumo, Cliver, Palmer, Salah and Bruno Fernandes is also pretty useful, I think, in the midfield, with Isak and Chris Wood up front, and a bench of Valdimarsson, Ivanossen, Robinson and Mikalenko. And I've got Isak as my captain at the moment, and I think Mikalenko would be swapped for Robinson in terms of these rankings. I know Robinson got 2 assists at Anfield earlier this season, but that red card played a huge part in my opinion, and I think Mikalenko would have a better chance of a clean sheet there against Arsenal. But that's all hypothetical. We can talk about that in future team selection videos, of course. And as for the vice captaincy, it would be on Salah. No Erling Haaland once again. That's something I could address beforehand, but if I were to buy him in, it would be now in Gameweek 30. But that is a sneak preview, and buying Livramento would leave me with nothing in the bank, 0.0 million, and that makes it difficult to make other moves, for example, like Ivanossen to Jean-Philippe Mateta. So I've got a lot to weigh up in the coming weeks. Maybe the wildcard just helps me to sort out different issues and structural problems in my squad. But that's what I'll delve into in my Gameweek 30 team selection. So discussing different avenues, maybe downgrading Mbumo to Eze or Sarr will give me enough money to then buy Mateta for Ivanossen and make other upgrades elsewhere, getting a triple up in Newcastle as well as Crystal Palace if I really want to go in that direction for double Gameweek 32, and then addressing double Gameweek 33, blank Gameweek 34, and perhaps future doubles like Gameweek 36 in the best possible way. That wraps up another FPL Transfer Plans podcast for the season, this time out of Gameweek 30, and we've still got quite a while until the next deadline, which leaves us food for thought and hopefully enough time to come up with very good solutions for FPL squads. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below, even suggestions from our own team or for other people. Be sure to help each other in the comment section there. And thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy, which will return in the coming weeks. So keep your eyes peeled for that. The best wildcard, limitless squads, my own team selection, and deadline streams will be headed your way there for the Champions League. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the Championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Spotify, and much more can be found in the description. Enjoy the rest of the international break, and I'll see you next Tuesday for that deadline stream.